To today's capacity building training. I love what's happening in the chat right now with all of the networking. Very awesome. My name is Jessie Poré. I'm ANA's Training and Technical Assistance Manager, and we're really happy that you have joined us today. This training is designed to provide you with practical tools, resources, and strategies to strengthen your program implementation, improve grant management, and ultimately enhance the impact of your work in your communities. So I highly encourage you to actively participate, take notes, and think about how you might apply these insights to your own grant activities. So to officially open our time together today, we're very fortunate to have with us Hope McDonald Lone Tree, the Acting Commissioner for the Administration for Native Americans, who will share opening remarks and set the stage for our training today. Acting Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessie, Yat'e, everyone. Good afternoon, community leaders, project managers, and ANA TT experts. Welcome to ANA's capacity building virtual training today. She'e Hope McDonald Lone Tree Yinshie, Todachini Nishle, Hashkahad Zohopashashin, Naathane Edishache Ado Betane Edishanele. It's a wonderful day to see all of you joining us this afternoon, and what a great day it is to be alive and to have a purpose that serves our Native people. So I want to thank you for that. Every day when I drive to work and pass by national monuments and the nation's capital, I am reminded of the historic and modern day challenges of our tribal nations. But I am also humbled to be given the opportunity to lead ANA. As a former tribal leader, I know firsthand the urgency and important work and resources needed to help our children and families and communities. So today, it's about strengthening the core of what makes your programs thrive, which is strong administration, effective grant management, and tools for a path of long-term sustainability. When Congress formally established ANA in 1972, they knew from tribal leaders that providing funding to establish foundational structures and innovative programs was the key to supporting tribal sovereignty. Today, our mission remains much the same, and we want to help your organization's ability to grow, innovate, and adapt and lead lasting change for your people. By investing in your capacity, we're investing in the resilience and self-determination of Native communities. In addition to learning today, I encourage you to share your experiences, your successes, and even your challenges. Often, the most valuable lessons come from the people who are doing similar work. And remember, ANA and our TTA providers, our assistance centers, are here as partners in your journey. We have an exciting set of sessions led by our regional TTA centers. We'll talk about managing grant funding effectively so that every dollar works for your community. We'll explore how to use data to tell your project's story and amplify your impact. We'll share strategies for generating revenue and sustaining your work beyond the life of a grant. And we'll look at ways to strengthen collaboration within your organizations to break down silos and work more effectively together. Your time is valuable, and I hope that you will find value in the topics and tools that are intended to sharpen your skills and not just sharpen, but also strengthen your organizations. We know the work that you do matters deeply, and your dedication is building a stronger future for generations to come. The future is brighter with you in it, and ANA is here to support your project. And we will make the most of your time today. So please, we look forward to joining you, listening and learning, and I hope that you are able to provide us some feedback at the end of this training as well. So thank you very much. And I will hand it over to Jessie, who will kick off the training content.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner, for your thoughtful words and always championing ANA's important mission. I'm now happy to introduce our cultural presenter, Mike Leframboise. training manager for ANA's Western Regions Training and Technical Assistance Center, and also member of the Blackfeet tribe. Mike will open our gathering in a traditional way, grounding our time together in cultural respect and unity. Please join me in welcoming Mike.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'll be using Blackfoot language today to open us up in a good way. And with a prayer and time permitting, I'll give a lesson in that prayer that Blackfoot people have and in our ideology. So with that said, I'll go ahead and begin. Hoka hai hayo na pina tu seo. Ayo stabai ta piupa. Ayo ki pita ki ko kumikisum. Ki pisuats ki pakse pisuats. Di teits katsimaranok sistukoik. Ho ki spomosagiano ko 6 nissa ko 6. Nissa ko sinanix. Ayon nuk spomosagiat sa mohkanakak. Ni tannex matua kiwa kio kui pitasa popak. O ki nahkoa istustikum pa pumki istigattoiwa misami sa popak. Hogin ko es just kuma pa punki sigatto iwa misami sapo ki namskiwa. Hogin it's the BMX ninna wasakuma kina ki nexista sixika ki. Okay. Nakspomo kinna ninnams cakes. Ninnams ka geeks, xista geeks, nipomo cakes. Knatsumiteeks, kannakaatsi cheeks. O kia patso cheeks, kinaeks ki moto keeks ki kahquakes. Hogi mi sixika, kito keeks x kinaeks, kannakaatsi cheeks, six gates to piece in them. Kneto ka piskotik, apoxy pi kaneito. Hogi kito totomaps pa. Kitei ki mohpinan, takanixikake. Hinotokana ki aksa tomo okso koawe samskapo pikanio. O ki kita peaks, pokaks, matapiks, acetapiks. O ki natakai ki muhsi sinnan. Itakai I ka ki maat sinnan. Itakai ki muh sinnan. Ohto ki na pina tuusi ista paitapi. O ki stuotsimani Mr. May pay the peace. Ik suka pi pay to peace. I kita mi pay to peace and na pio sinne. Hena koa sinne I tama pio. It's an itakihpinnan. Kamutan. Okay, awan ni kita pigs at simoiskat. Ni tseta pe at simoiskat. Nistua koka makui sa po. Namohtu toa am ska po pi kanni wa mo mi pi kannis sak. Okay, pikani akanyo pa kitoa sinun 6 gates to peace sinyo. Mo kana mo 6 ka apatso pikani kan apamskapo pikani. Kaneto ka piskotsik apoksi pikaneito. Okay, a couple of things in this prayer that Blackfoot people we pray to the cosmos, the Spomita peaks, to the Kakatusiks, the stars, the Napi Natusi is the sun, Kipitaki Kokamikisum is the moon, and their son, Itpisuas, morning star. But it doesn't mean morning star, it means something like cut up meat, for lack of a better explanation. It's a whole other lecture. And then there's a story in our history called Scarface, and this is designed to teach lessons on perseverance, not to give up, to always do your best, to just to be a good person. These are the lessons we get from Kakatusiks, the stars. So he went on his journey and he wanted to marry this woman. He wanted to marry this beautiful woman, but she said, if you get that scar removed, I might. So he really wanted, he set out to the sun and he met Morningstar, Scarface, and he has many names. And I'm giving you a condensed story. just for the purposes of today to get an idea of the models that exist in our stories that are still here. And he befriends Morningstar and he saves him from peril. And the dad is coming back from his journey. And for a long story short, he's gifting Scarface and the Blackfoot people a sweat, 100 willow sweat. And in there, there are 4 rounds. And if you can imagine a sweat, you see Morningstar as humans, the sun, and then Scarface sitting there. And on the first round, he tells the moon on the outside to open up and says, "Is this your son?" She said, "Yep." 3 times he does that. "Is this your son?" "Yes." "Is this your son?" "Yes." On the 4th round, they switch. And the son wipes the scar off his face and opens the door. He says, "Is this your son?" She said, "Yep." And she said, "No, you're mistaken. This is Scarface." So that's the story of how Blackfoot people got sweat. And that's the reason why women don't sweat, is because the woman was outside, but because they have their own ways of cleansing. Whole nother lecture. But I wanted to share that because I was reading in the news where all the planets were aligned, and Mercury and Venus are what is the morning star. And every couple of years they switch places as the morning star. So I'm thinking to myself, as just a person, how did we know that? When you sit with elders and you hear them talk about these stories, there's meaningful there's meaning out of it. And I just wanted to share that with everybody today, along with a good prayer. The prayer is asking everybody to have a good day, to learn that their children are safe, and that their children will come back and learn these types of things, will encourage them to learn these types of things, to never give up, always do your best. And I always say, in 100 years, all of us in this room are going to be an ancestor, and they're going to either perpetuate these stories and the language and the songs, or they're going to fall by the wayside. So ANA does a really good job, I believe, in helping communities pull that out and make that a possibility again in their community. So with that said, I appreciate the time and allowing me to say good words on your behalf in my language. I was very fortunate to grow up with my language, and I'm gonna use it every time I get. So Ken, have a good day.
Thank you, Mike. That was beautiful. Amazing. I felt very soothed when you were sharing your prayer. What a blessing that you were able to do that for us today and remind us of the values we carry, right, in this work. So really grateful for your contribution. At this time, I would like to introduce Napua Harbottle, Regional Director for ANA's Pacific Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, who will continue guiding us through the next portion of our training. Over to you, Napua.
Thank you, Jessie. I'm so excited about our 4 workshops being presented today by the ANA's 4 regional training and technical assistance centers. Hope alluded to what we have in store for you, but our first workshop will go over how to break down silos and enhance collaboration within your tribe or organization. Our second presentation will be about highlighting best practices for both programmatic and financial responsibilities for managing your grant funding and reporting. And the third presentation will walk you through how to leverage data to tell a compelling story about your project and its outcomes. And lastly, our last presentation will explore the core components of a community-centered fundraising plan focused on relationships, storytelling, donor engagement, and stewardship. But before we get into these presentations, I just did want to go over a few housekeeping items. So if we could go to the next slide. Oh. Okay. here we go. Please keep yourselves muted during the presentation. And if you have any questions during the presentation, you can enter your questions into the chat box and your questions will be answered at the end of each presentation during the question and answer section. If time allows and we run out of questions from the chat box, you'll be able to unmute yourself and ask those additional questions as well. It's ideal for all of you to have at least one staff member present for each presentation so that you can get the most out of this training. And the slide decks for these presentations will be shared in a follow-up email after we're done here today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. His name is Eric Watson, and he comes to us from the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, and he is the training manager there. Eric, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Nupu, and good morning. My name is Eric Watson, and I've been with the amazing Alaska Region TTA Center for 3 years. I'm a Inupiaq, Athabascan, affiliated with the Cook Inlet region, and currently live in Eagle River, Alaska. I'd like to acknowledge all the Indigenous homelands that we reside in, and I'm excited to be one of your facilitators today. Thank you for attending the 2025 ANA Capacity Building webinar, Increasing Strengthening Engagement Within Your Organization. All right, today we're going to talk about collaborating within your organization, and we hope that this will help foster the relationships with the people from other programs. Collaboration is defined as the process of individuals working together to achieve shared goals through combined effort and success. It promotes synergy, which is the interaction of cooperation to create something greater than one could do alone. When you collaborate, all levels within your organization will feel mutually supported and create a cycle of support. Collaboration also adds to your organization's resiliency by improving the ability to overcome challenges. Ultimately, collaboration can be a holistic approach that will involve everyone in your organization, not only to adopt this philosophy, but also to put it into practice. Oh, there we go. Okay, this tool is the Collaboration Matrix. It's a guide that illustrates how improving collaboration amongst teams, departments, and partners leads to greater efficiency, which results in a more meaningful impact within your organization. During today's webinar, we will guide you through this helpful tool. Although not all organizations start in the same position, this matrix highlights how addressing and improving these different conditions will improve your overall efficiency, leading to larger overall impact. So I have a question for the whole group. Where do you feel that your organization currently lies with your collaboration? In the chat, if you could please indicate none if your organization currently struggles with collaboration. Indicate minimum if there's a little bit of collaborating going on, but could use some improvement. Medium if there's a decent amount of collaboration taking place. And maximum if you feel that you really practice collaboration often and well. I'm going to give it just a moment. I see some people putting it into the chat. Interesting. Okay. So thank you for the responses. It looks like there's some improvement that could take place, but you're on your way. Okay. Well, thank you for putting that in. I appreciate it. All right, culture is the shared beliefs, practices, and values in a group of people. These are not only found in our tribal communities, but also extend to the organizations that we work in. Some examples of organizational culture include respect, open communication, coordination, and collaborative integrated activities. At this higher level, trust is important. It's more than an assured reliance on others. It also requires transparency and accountability at all levels. In a collaborative organization, the culture prioritizes the well-being of the community over individual gain and promotes resilience on each other. Your organization's values will be a part of this culture and will help all of your collaborative efforts. Building on this, clearly communicating the expectation for collaboration is important. This should not be a one-time thing. It should be addressed and it should be practiced often. This can and will reinforce the organizational collaborative culture that you have. Connecting the work you do to the mission is a good reminder that all of the work you do supports the broader goals and the greater good of each project, carefully utilizing everyone's efforts, talents, and skills. Reinforcing this with all employees can provide a sense of purpose and motivation. Strong leadership requires insightfulness and a desire to practice true collaboration, and it starts by leading by example. Encourage a collaborative culture rather than rivalries and working in silos. This will increase everyone's efficiency, bringing work to its highest levels and allowing everyone to produce quality work in reasonable timeframes. Highlighting shared goals, interdepartmental projects, fostering open communication, all of these can support your collaboration as a strength. It's worth noting that there's a difference between elective and collective leadership. Elective leadership is granted through a formal process, such as an election or by voting. These can be your board members, council members, or the representatives. Collective leadership is an informal process where leadership is shared amongst multiple individuals or the group. Authority is distributed. Decisions are made collaboratively. This creates an environment of self-accountability. Holding oneself to the highest standards of quality work while also uplifting those around you. Promoting accountability can reduce redundancy and confusion about roles and responsibilities. Team members are more likely to work on their own when they know what's expected. Strong leadership requires insightfulness and a desire to practice true collaboration. It starts with leading by example. Encourage a collaborative culture rather than rivalries and working in silos. This will increase everyone's efficiency, bringing back the work to its highest levels. Collective leadership is the informal process where leadership is shared amongst multiple individuals or the group. And team members are most likely to own their work when they know what's expected. Okay, so competition. When can competition become dysfunctional? Competition is something we all encounter. It can be a powerful motivator, promotes productivity, and highlights individual achievement. However, when not properly managed, competition can lead to working inefficiently with others, causing individuals or departments to hoard information in order to be in control or being seen as better than others. This can create a conflict. It can create stress, inefficiency, and the focus may be the individual's success rather than buying into the larger shared goals. This can also lead to work in silos, power struggles, or turf wars within an organization where team members are less willing to help each other. Staff morale and longevity can suffer. It can also deter innovating, which impacts creativity and generating new ideas. Trust can be compromised if competition is not managed effectively. When competition becomes dysfunctional, project deadlines can suffer, teams work inefficiently, and communication breaks down. Good communication can create cohesiveness and trust. It also is the ability to share thoughts, ideas, and information in safe and respectful ways. There are many forms of communication, and it's important for the everyday functioning of an organization. Without clear, open, and consistent communication, collaboration quickly breaks down. You can start by being clear with your goals. Remember, this is a shared vision and is reflective of the mission. Your team should firmly understand what the expectations are. Clearly articulate what you expect from them while also being supportive. Building on this, communication should be reciprocal. It's a two-way street. Staff have the ability to provide constructive feedback and be a part of the process. This is empowering and allows them to feel like their thoughts matter. We all work on deadlines, so being responsive is crucial. You're going to depend on others, and they're also going to depend on you. Timely responses not only allow things to move forward in an efficient way, but can be seen as a sign of respect. When communicating, it may be easy to drift into other topics that are less essential to the overall goal or provide too many details. Vagueness can be a detriment, and the more details that you include, the more challenging it can be for listeners to follow and recall, especially if the subject matter is new to them. So it's really important to be concise. Lastly, minimizing redundancy involves several key components. Clearly define roles so that you avoid unnecessary overlap, identify who leads, who supports who, and when collaboration should take place and occur. It also clarifies the decision-making process by minimizing multiple people acting independently. Effectively communicating will reduce or eliminate unnecessary repetition or duplication of information. All right. I like this quote from Representative Sharice Davids because it emphasizes the importance of communication and recognizes the need to navigate it effectively, especially during disagreements. Strong alliances can thrive where disagreement exists, but they cannot thrive where free and open communication is shut down. So that takes me to the next slide. Communication is a really big part of collaboration, and conflict is something that occurs that you should be prepared for. We may not always agree with one another. What is important when addressing conflict is to not outright avoid it, but it's important how you manage it. There are different ways you can address how to manage this, and I'd like to highlight some. Starting off, it's important to recognize the conflict so that it can be addressed. This involves an awareness that something may not be working and could be a differing opinion on the approach of a project or what the anticipated outcomes might be. Ask yourself, is there something not being said? Are there misunderstandings or frustrations that I can't see that are beneath the surface? When emotions are high, it's easy to ramble, it's easy to lose focus. Clarity is key. Get to the point without being harsh. Sometimes it may be helpful to rephrase what you're trying to say or adjust your messaging in a respectful way. Also, respect your differences. We all have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and communication styles. Conflict often arises because we expect others to think or behave like we do. Respecting those differences helps shift the focus from right versus wrong to understanding. Even in heated conflict, there's almost always something we can agree on, even if it's just a shared goal or wanting a better outcome. Finding that common thread or common ground can shift the dynamic from opposition to collaboration. People show up to conflict with different histories, pressures, and emotions. What's important is to try to understand why someone feels or reacts the way they do. It often has less to do than what you think. Actively listening is fully focusing on its understanding and thoughtfully responding to what somebody's saying. Having a respect for differences is essential to collaborating. Different ideas aren't necessarily wrong, and acknowledging this can possibly lead to other innovative ideas. It can also empower your team when they understand their opinions are valued. And going back to your values, practicing respect for others' differences when this occurs. Lastly, keep in mind conflict, it's an opportunity for growth. Okay, so a great way to navigate these concepts is to apply a real world example. Let's imagine that you're in the process of developing a community-led project focused on food security. In a large community meeting, this priority is identified by tribal members and that there's a lack of affordable and dependable produce in your community throughout the year. Food items are significantly more in cost than in urban areas. And due to limited shipping options, this can impact availability and shipping cost. Your organization has decided to focus on addressing this issue by implementing a project to develop a local poultry farm. One of the first steps of this process is working diligently with your leadership, whether it's your board of directors or your tribal council. Leadership's going to guide this process. This will help avoid unnecessary conflict and power struggles. The next step to this process will be working directly with your team to build a strategy and a work plan. It's important to view this project as a shared initiative. You're going to be working with your coworkers, and for large organizations, you may be new as you'll be interacting staff you don't normally work with. An example of this process after you've been given the guidance from your leadership is to work directly with other staff within your organization. And a good first step is working with your finance team. Developing a project budget is usually one of the first steps taken when you're creating a project. This requires lengthy conversations ranging from project expenses to questions regarding specific activities. If programs and accounting don't have good timelines and communication, this can result in delays with getting things done efficiently throughout the process. By engaging in the steps we've discussed, you're showing respect and a commitment to the overall process, which will result on strengthening your relationship and continuing your collaborative culture. It's also a good idea to work on relationship building prior to focusing on a project, as this is going to take time. What will be important is to focus on the issues and work with your team towards this shared goal. Utilize their feedback, actively listen to their concerns, and have respectful dialogue. This process will follow the guiding principles adopted by your organization. When working with your team, avoid repeating efforts, repeating information, or tasks unnecessarily. Clarify everybody's role in the process and streamline communication. This will save time, prevent people from feeling like their work was wasted or ignored, and improve collaboration. Better communication, as indicated in this image, will streamline this process and strengthen your coordination and collaboration. Working together closely and having good communication will get to agreeing on how you coordinate your approach. Clearly identifying their role to provide financial oversight and guidance during the process prevents confusion, will empower your team, and allow you to work towards the same goal, ultimately building trust and accountability. Okay, so the next part of the collaboration matrix involves coordination. When we all coordinate well, we create clarity, we reduce confusion, and we work more effectively towards shared goals. An agreement to work in a structured approach is a mutual understanding between individuals or between a coworker and a supervisor to follow a clearly defined, organized, and goal-oriented process when completing tasks and projects. An outline for collaboration is a structured plan. It defines how individuals or teams work together effectively towards a shared goal. And this begins by having a mutual agreement to work in a structured way. That means we don't just jump into tasks. We create a plan, we define roles, set expectations, and agree on timelines. That structure helps us avoid duplication, minimize misunderstandings, and ensure accountability. Doesn't mean we lose flexibility. It just means that we have a solid foundation to adapt from. Once we commit to structure, we need an outline for collaboration. And this can be done by identifying who's responsible for what. Even the best structure and clearest plans won't work without mutual trust and respect. Coordination only works if we believe in each other's intentions and give each other space to contribute meaningfully. This means there will be trust among teammates, respect for different work styles and ideas, and giving and receiving feedback constructively. Respect builds reliability, and reliability ultimately strengthens collaboration and coordination. Okay, whether you're in the same department or if you're spread across different teams, the ability to integrate your efforts and collaborate effectively is really what drives lasting success. This isn't just about working together, it's about aligning your resources, building on strengths, setting shared goals, and ultimately staying what's focused on what matters. Integration begins with recognizing what each person brings to the table. We all have different strengths, and real collaboration happens when we use those strengths intentionally. When teams focus on what people do best instead of trying to make everyone fit in the same mold, productivity goes up and engagement follows. Individual success, it's important, but integration requires team-based goals. These are goals that can only be accomplished together with one another and not in isolation. When you create a shared goal, you also create shared accountability. It's not about pointing fingers, it's about pulling in the same direction. In high-performing organizations, collaboration sometimes can be seen as a buzzword, and it's not that. It's a mindset. People don't just stay in their lanes, they ask questions, they share knowledge, and they support one another. Think of collaboration as a chain. If one weak is linked, the whole link suffers. So what do you have to do to collaborate within your organization? Well, you can start by visualizing success. This might look like teams celebrating each other's wins, transparent communication, decisions made with input from multiple departments, and with fewer silos and duplicated efforts. When the focus is only on individual results, collaboration is non-existent. But when you prioritize shared wins, when success is defined by how you got there, not just the outcome, you build lasting relationships and high trust within your teams. Remember, collaboration isn't just about hitting targets, it's about winning as a team. Okay, a good plan doesn't just outline what needs to get done, it defines how we're going to do it, who's doing it, and when it'll happen. Planning well is the difference between a smooth project and one that's full of confusion, delays, and miscommunication. Let's start with clarity. Before any real progress can happen, everyone must know their role and what they're responsible for. This limits tasks getting duplicated, avoids missing steps, and clearly assigns roles. When roles are clearly defined, everyone knows their lane and how they're going to contribute to that bigger picture. The next part is organizing all of these efforts into a work plan. This is the blueprint for your project. When creating your work plan, envision what you're trying to achieve. Once the big picture's laid out, break the project into individual activities. And this is going to involve everyone and all of the steps that are needed to be taken and considers any deadlines. It doesn't need to be fancy, it just needs to be clear, accessible, and realistic. This will help you track progress, make delegation easier, and ensure nothing gets overlooked. This also gives your team members smaller wins to celebrate and helps build momentum with your project. Timelines create momentum, but only if they're realistic. When addressing your timeline, establish the timelines or milestones. A good timeline builds in buffer time and allows you to expect the unexpected. Lastly, assign specific responsibilities to individuals. Not just that your team or organization is going to do it, but identify the specific person who will draft a report or conduct an activity. This accountability prevents confusion and helps team members take ownership of their work. The approach can be seen as an agreement to coordinate how you're going to proceed. So going back to our example, working with your team will require working with these other stakeholders and creating your work plan using some of the steps that we've discussed. These stakeholders may not be just staff though. For example, in Alaska Native communities, aunties often serve as crucial community members involving cultural values, traditions, and knowledge. Their involvement in various forms of collaboration helps strengthen communities and preserves our heritage. Having our aunties or even elders can help support the process and reinforce collaboration. After working with stakeholders to conceptualize how you're going to proceed, you'll want to outline this in a work plan. Your work plan will clearly outline what activities will be provided, the different roles and responsibilities, and timelines. This is the pinnacle of the collaboration matrix and is aligning your operations and resources, ensuring that they're integrated. It's the outcome of all the hard work that you and your team have done in this process. Okay, this quote from Stephen Covey illustrates the importance of what we've discussed so far. An empowered organization is one in which individuals have the knowledge, skill, desire, and opportunity to personally succeed in a way that leads to collective organizational success. An organization that practices good collaboration asks for everyone to participate and reinforces that it's everyone's responsibility. When everyone feels that they can succeed, the organization will have success. Focus on the greater good. Collaboration is more than working in the same space. It's about intentionally combining our strengths towards a common objective. When people collaborate well, work that gets done faster and smarter. Tasks are shared, knowledge is pooled, and duplication is avoided. Collaboration fuels creativity. Diverse ideas often lead to breakthrough solutions that wouldn't emerge in isolation. Good collaboration improves communication, both what we say and how we listen. Teams that collaborate well often have clearer expectations, fewer misunderstandings, and more respectful dialogue. Collaboration also builds trust. When people work side by side, they learn about each other's styles, strengths, and motivations. This leads to respect, accountability, and stronger working relationships that extend beyond individual projects. As a reminder, effective collaboration emerges when the focus shifts from competition to shared goals. Okay, so in all honesty, there are many, many, many strategies on how you can work effectively within your organization. What I'd like to do now is in the chat, open it up to all of you to maybe share some strategies that you've used to collaborate and work well within your team. Is it team building activities? Is it, doing things outside of work? Is it working on side projects? In the chat, if you can maybe share some strategies that you've used, this may help inform others in the room on different things they could consider when they're wanting to work within their own organization. I do want to mention that, as many of you indicated that you are wanting to improve on your collaboration, if you're comfortable sharing, maybe in the chat, if you could indicate some needs, some areas that still need improvement and what you'd like to do to address these. And we can either chat about that or you can provide feedback in the chat. Okay, so I'm seeing meetings, which leads to better communication. Develop tools to support resource sharing between students in multiple programs. Ooh, Napua, I like that. Be more supportive than critical. In my trainings that we offer when we talk about developing projects and working with finance staff, in my history, finance has always been kind of on their own island. They've done their thing. And I personally made it an effort to spend more time with them and develop those relationships outside of just projects. And that really shifts your relationship from a transactional approach. You're not working with them just because something needs to get done. You're working with them because they're your coworker. And so there's lots of ways you can engage with other staff and build those relationships. All right, you guys have some great ideas so far. Ooh, and food. Food goes a long way too. So weekly lunches are a good idea. Okay, well, thank you for all that feedback, everyone. Those are some good ideas. You're welcome to keep putting things in chat as well. So as mentioned throughout this presentation, there's many strategies that you can implement to be a collaborative organization. The one thing I really want you to keep in mind is that these shouldn't be one-time things. They should be adopted into your organizational culture. They're going to take time to develop, and really they're only sustainable by continuing them through consistent effort. Okay, so on behalf of the Administration for Native Americans and the Alaska Region TTA Center, I'd like to thank you for attending today's capacity building webinar. And I would like to open it up to any questions, should there be any.
Yes, we don't have any questions in the chat box right now, but you're more than welcome to unmute yourselves if you have any questions for Eric. If you could please raise your hand first so that I can call on you, and we're not getting too many people asking questions at the same time. It does not look like we have any questions for you, Eric.
Okay, well, thank you for allowing us to present, Nipua and Jesse. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for that very insightful and valuable presentation. I'm sure many of us can relate. Um, you know, there are lots of frustrations that can occur in the workplace and between coworkers. And so thank you for providing those very important nuggets on how to build stronger organizational culture. Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Nipua.
Okay, with that, I want to introduce our next presenter. We have Jenica Beatty from the Western Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, and she is the Technical Assistance Manager there. Jenica will be presenting on how to effectively manage your budgets and your reporting. Jenica?
Thanks, Nipua. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So yes, hello everyone. My name is Jenica Beatty and I'm with the Western Region. And as Nipua said, we'll be talking about effectively managing grant funding. So thank you guys all for jumping on and participating today. This is going to be especially helpful for program staff who may not necessarily be involved in the day-to-day financials and oversight. So first, we're going to recognize some of the common pitfalls and challenges that we see with our grant recipients. I then want to explain why monitoring your budget on a regular basis is important to the overall project success. We also identify best practices, and what I'm going to ask you to do is participate in a short exercise that actually applies some of those in real time. So with that, I'll ask that Angel drop in 2 files into the chat box where you'll be able to download and prep for that activity. Don't worry if you guys have issues downloading or accessing the file. Ultimately, this is just an overview. You'll be able to work with your project specialist and TA staff to use these tools moving forward if you feel that this is something that you would like to implement, and we highly recommend you do. The first is an Excel spreadsheet. It's a template for your own budget tracking. And the second is a case study for this participant activity. After that, I'm going to ask you guys to share some of your own best practices. So as I'm walking through the slides, feel free to drop something in the chat box. If something strikes a chord with you and you're kind of like, oh, that happens all the time, you can ask your fellow peers to see if there's any suggestions for you. And if you have any suggestions, go ahead and put those in the chat box. We're going to spend a bit of time at the end discussing things that really work for you guys. First, though, I want to kick it off with a poll. So let me grab that here. This is going to sort of get a sense of where you stand right now. So go ahead, there's 3 questions. Go ahead and let us know how frequently you're already meeting and collaborating between your finance staff and program staff. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. The title is right, but the poll is not. 1 second, I'm going to end this poll. I'm sorry about that. Let's see. Here we go. That's the right one. Sorry about that. All right. So again, this first question is asking how frequently you meet with your accounting staff, and then how frequently you meet, if you're accounting, how frequently you're meeting with your program staff. Then let us know, what do you know about oversight as a program manager? What responsibilities are you in charge of? And then what is a financial officer in charge of? So I'll give you a few seconds to fill those in. Oh, I do see a comment in the box that says, it says select all that apply, but only allows one selection. There is an option at the bottom that says all of the above, though, if you'd like to choose that one. Few more seconds here just to get a sense of where people are standing. All right. I think that's about it. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So in the first question, how frequently do you guys meet? I see a couple are weekly and several are monthly. That's awesome. Glad to hear it. A few of you are quarterly, which is on pace. And annually and never, I would recommend, and I will recommend, meeting a bit more frequently. And then the next two, and I'm sorry about that setup. I'm not sure what happened there, but I do see most of you did select all of the above for both questions, and that is true. So for both of these, everything listed here is a task expected of the project manager as well as the financial officers. If you are a program staff and you are not aware of those things, it may be something to chat about with your finance officer. Great, so that gets kind of where we're at. All right, so what other common trends do we see? First, we see some common trends that offer pitfalls or challenges for our projects in staffing or staff turnover. Oftentimes, a project is delayed from the get-go because filling positions can be hard to do. It's not easy especially if you're in a remote location or trying to fill a position that requires a set level of knowledge or expertise. Likewise, you might lose staff for any number of reasons. If someone were to get sick or go on maternity leave. When staffing is delayed, it's highly likely that the project is also delayed. And if that's the case, spending down A&A grant funds is going to start slowing down. It might even stop altogether and your project won't be moving forward as planned. So that can become quite challenging. Another issue is working in silos, and Eric's presentation touched on this. We see this across the board, regardless of type of organization or tribal community. Chances are you've experienced this at some point. Program staff and finance staff don't always communicate regularly, and they work independently without communicating. This miscommunication also creates issues in your original and ongoing budget planning. So just from the very get-go, a grant writer might have been brought on board to write your grant application without even speaking to program staff, or maybe there was no program staff because there had been no award made yet. So that silo created a problem where the grant writer might not have already planned for the type and amount of funds needed to run the actual project. So there's a good chance that you may not have the dollars necessary to complete planned activities. Or you may find that necessary activities were not accounted for in the work plan or the approved budget when you move forward in your project. And it can create a situation where you're overspent or the project is stalled. So we want to be aware of that moving forward. Another problem we've seen is with drawdowns. First, with making irregular or infrequent drawdowns. We often see this happen if there's a new financial officer, for instance. Somebody is new and that process for hiring took time. And then once they are hired, they have to gain access to the payment management system, which is a system where drawdowns are made. And if they don't know how to use that system, it also takes time to train them. So even if the project is moving forward, drawdowns are falling behind. And when the new officer is finally ready to go, they're ready to make a drawdown, it might have been a couple months. And so they're a couple months behind on those drawdowns. In addition, you might be transitioning between one project year to the next, and that can create more difficulties as you go along. So these kinds of things are things to stay on top of. The second case we often see is with overdrafts. So this can happen when a person does have access to payment management system to make those drawdowns, but they're drawing down excess funding. Maybe that's because they don't have the total reported number that they need to be drawing down exactly, so they estimate it. Maybe it's because they're unaware of their notice of grant award or NGA, or maybe it's because they're not making drawdowns using what we call it is a reimbursement method. So all of those can put you into overdrafts, and that means you have cash on hand. And if you have cash on hand, that can be really tricky because if it's not used right away, then it becomes a red flag for payment purposes, and it might even result in a frozen funds until you use those cash on hand. So definitely be speaking with your financial staff about that issue as well. Tracking is a contributing factor to the drawdown issues, and that's kind of the focus of today's presentation. If program staff and financial staff are not monitoring their spending independently and then coming together to ensure that everyone is on the same page, one or both of them might be unaware of the budget of the project. And if you're not aware of your budget, how can you be completely on top of project progress? There really is, it's really difficult to do. Finally, the last common issue we see is when tribes and organizations have to play catch up due to all of those reasons I mentioned above. If anything changes, like losing a staff member, or if anything is not being monitored because of silos or poor tracking methods, then we'll see grant recipients who are overspent, falling behind on project progress, and maybe they want to change their budgets or their project plans rather than addressing that internal issue. Well, that's fine. You do have the opportunity to make those changes, but those changes, like a budget modification, can take a really long time. So as you're waiting for it to be approved, you're falling even more behind. And it can create bigger issues than if you had been on top of things from the get-go. So how can you address all those issues? Well, monitoring your budget. Monitoring is a way to stay on target because you're aware of your spending practices. It ensures that you are working within your approved budget and you're avoiding being over or underspent before it becomes an issue. It's also a good way to understand your project progress. That is, you'll have more insight into whether your work plan is moving forward based on spending, and you'll be able to determine questions like, do you need to pick up the pace in order to expend approved funds by the end of the year? Or are you making wise funding decisions based on your project activities? Or even, let's say, in the best case scenario, you're actually saving money on tasks that you thought were going to cost you more. And you have an opportunity to kind of move your money around and use the remaining funds in other approved ways rather than leaving it on the table. But you would never know that if you weren't monitoring your budget. So along with those, monitoring your budget is also going to help you adhere to that work plan, the objective work plan, or OWP, because you'll have a handle on where the money is going and if it's being used as expected for project-specific expenditures. And of course, avoiding those lengthy amendments. So we've put together some tips and tricks. Some of these you may already be doing. Some of them may be new for you. And especially if you are a program staff member who has been working in a silo or maybe just is not involved in finances, this might be your first time hearing it. So take this with a grain of salt and touch base with your project specialist and your TA manager for your region so that you can kind of follow up on each of these tips and tricks. So the first is fairly obvious. Don't spend money you can't justify. So for instance, in that situation where you had staff turnover, if staff are not on board, how are you moving activities forward? If you can't move activities forward because there is no staff, you should not be spending money on those activities. If you are, it can create some of that overspending issue. Second, working with your procurement office if you have one. So not everyone does, and that's understandable, but if you do, they're going to have the training needed to ensure your project stays in compliance with internal and federal policies, and it's also going to reduce your workload. So trying to source consultants or purchase supplies, all of that can be handled by that procurement office. And it's going to help you focus on the project itself while still being aware of where your project spending is going. Some more suggestions: make use of an administrative assistant if possible. Again, may not be possible, but even if you could get someone part-time, it can help reduce your workload. Having someone's dedicated eyes on tracking your finances, collecting data, backing up documentation, that's really important for project activities and expenditures, using invoices and receipts and purchase orders. And then managing your reports, whether they're reporting to you or to ANA or to your board and other stakeholders, it's going to make your job easier. And because that person, when they're dedicated to that role, can be a go-between between you and a siloed department, it can help mitigate any kind of gaps that might need filling and you just don't have time to fill. Another recommendation is to onboard and orient all staff, not just new hires. So you're going to want to ensure that everyone is on the same page and understands the same expectations. And staff who've been around for many, many, many years might need a refresher on policies, procedures, or even just an overview of what this new ANA grant actually is. So you can incorporate their training with your new hire. And then finally, as previously mentioned, be sure that your finance office is making regular drawdowns. It not only keeps your spending on track and in alignment with your project expenditures, it also demonstrates to ANA and other entities, and that's the key part, not just ANA, but other entities, that your project is progressing as planned and that you actually need the funding. So I do see a question here asking about how frequently should drawdowns be made? Is quarterly sufficient? You can make drawdowns, or finance can make drawdowns every day if they needed to. Going quarterly can be a bit difficult because 3 months pass, things get lost in the shuffle. ANA or those other entities might be looking into things and seeing where you stand. We recommend monthly or more frequently, if that's feasible for you guys. And so as an example, if you're awarded $900,000 for a 3-year project, and if you were to say not make a drawdown in year 1, it can look a bit odd to someone who only sees the numbers. They're not going to know the situation that's taking place. They're not going to know about staff turnover. They're not going to know about the woodland fire that is preventing activities. All they're going to see is your numbers. So having sort of a regular drawdown schedule can be really helpful to mitigate any other unexplained or untrackable issues. Okay, so here's the fun part. At least I think it's fun. We'll see if you guys think it's fun too. We're going to do a little activity. This is the downloads from the chat box. So I'll ask Angel if you could just drop that in there one more time so it's at the top of everyone's box. We're going to take a look at a simple budget tracker to actually track project expenses and then compare it to an approved budget using that case study. So I'm going to quickly grab control of the screen and change that here. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the case study and the template. Now, again, just as a reminder, this is for practice purposes, for an overview. If you're having issues opening your document, playing around in it, don't worry too much. You will have time to work with your TA specialist to sort of tailor this to your project. But hopefully this gives you a quick overview of how to use something like this. So first I'll talk about the tracker on the bottom of the screen. This is set up for as whatever time frame you want, whatever type of expenditure, whether it's federal or non-federal. You can choose to do whatever you'd like with it. I would recommend personally doing something like monthly and then saving this document as like budget tracker for June or budget tracker July 2025 and having one for every month. That way you're staying on top of things. Now, if you're an Excel whiz and maybe you already are doing this, drop it in the chat box what changes you might recommend. I have heard that you could create multiple tabs and have every month, and then the comparison tab could be updated to calculate your full year. That's fine too. We wanted to make this as simple as possible for people who may not be doing this already. So here is a case study up top here that is going to introduce a very, very simple fake, totally fake project that can help you kind of understand the use of this tracker. The first thing I'm going to do though is kind of put it so that it's for this case study. The project is Small Bend, Big Heart. So I'm going to change in my tracker the tribe org that we're dealing with. I'm just going to put Small Bend. And you can put whatever, you can put your project name, you can put your department, you can put your, whatever you'd like. And the budget time frame for this case study is May of 2025. Again, if you want to do this for the whole year or by month or by quarter, that's up to you. The next thing you'll notice are object class categories. And if you are program staff and you're not familiar with object class categories, this is how ANA funds your projects. So if you've not had a chance to look at your Notice of Grant Award, NGA, you can find it in Grant Solutions, you can find it in your grant file, and you should be able to also get it from your finance officer if they have not already shared it with you. Everything that you are approved to spend falls under an object class category. The only one not shown in this drop-down menu is construction. ANA does not allow for construction costs. So you would choose which category is best fitting for your expenditure. The date of the expenditure goes next, the item description and expense. On the next page, or next tab, what have you, I'll update this for Small Bend and I'll put in the time frame, and we're going to use what's listed in the case study as budget year 1. So you might have your roll-up budget if you're a new grantee and you're working with all 3 years, you might have a roll-up budget. If you're working by budget year, you might have just year 1. That is something you'll want to think through and maybe speak with your TA specialist and project specialist about. So I'm going to put the time frame as year 1 for the case study. The next thing to be aware of are columns C and D. These have formulas in them already. Don't touch them. Unless you're familiar with Excel and you know how to manipulate those, that's fine. I'm just, for those who may not play around in Excel, this can be kind of confusing when the formulas get mixed up. There's a note here just to remind you not to do that. The next thing you're going to do is take a look at your approved budget. Now, if you were working on your own, you could get this from the NGA. The NGA is going to have a very similar display like what you see in the case study. So you're just going to transfer that into this column, column B, for the approved budget. This is the budget ANA said you're allowed to work with. So I'm going to quickly do that. Put in 100,000 for personnel, and this is all made up. This is totally made up numbers. 15,000 for fringe. 5,000 for travel. This project example does not have equipment. Supplies is 10,000. Too many zeros. Contractual is 20. And other is 100,000. Also at the bottom is a calculation for their indirect at 20%. Now you might have the de minimis, you might have an IDC rate, or you might not have anything. So this formula in column B with indirect will need to be adjusted for your own project if you start using this tracker. Once you have column B entered, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to go back to the tracker page and enter the expenses in the case study. There's about 6 of them. Some are supplies, some are invoices, They're listed. You guys can take a look, consider where would you put them, which object class category would you put them under? And there's really no right or wrong answer here because this is just a case study. But you'll have to do this with your own expenses. You'll have to know which object class category your expenses are coming from. And then you're going to also have to consider what description you're putting in and what the total expense will be. So go ahead and do that. And again, if you're having trouble accessing this file or playing around with it, don't stress too much. We can certainly work with you one-on-one. So,
Hey, Jenica, I think this is a good place. It looks like we have a lot of finance people participating today. And we have a bunch of recommendations in the chat box. So let's see, from Shireen Payton, she recommends that you add a column for vendor and make 13 tabs, one for each month and one for comparison that auto-populates throughout the year.
yeah, definitely. I think that'd be awesome. And again, TA staff, if you're not familiar with Excel, TA staff can help you work through what kind of formulas you're going to have to figure out to make that work. But yeah, I think that'd be awesome. You'd have one for every month and then your roll-up budget with comparisons.
Nice. From Janet Clark, we do have another recommendation. She says you're able to download this information from the accounting system like QuickBooks in an Excel format, just need to match the actual budget.
Oh, great tip there. See, and that's where I don't know much about QuickBooks because I don't do accounting, but that's an awesome tip. Thank you.
And then from Jean Gerhard, Cyrus, I think she's saying you might want to also add a tab for the method of payment.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So
So that
whether
you're
that be a
tracking whether
check,
it's, yeah, check, card, cash, etc.
right,
And then if you were combining, again, this gets a bit more convoluted, but I'm trying to keep it simple. But if you were combining your federal share with your non-federal, you could mark that off as which is which.
right. Okay, great recommendations, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so just a few more seconds so you can kind of get a sense of this, and then we'll walk through it together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me.
Oh yeah, Janet, I can do that. Janet was asking if I could put the data into the chat box too. So I will plug that in here. So we've got. And I'm not going to put everything, Janet, just because I'm going to type it on the screen in just a second anyway. But I'll put in the numbers so you guys can see the numbers actually working. Oh, are you getting them? I was typing them, Janet. If you want to see them, we'll work on it together and I'll show each screen by itself. Whatever you prefer. I'm here to serve. All right. Half a minute more, and then we'll do this together.
While you're working on that, I'll just kind of read what Sylvia Hussey put into the chat box. If the actual budget by program line item is loaded on the front end of the program, into QuickBooks. Then a standard custom report can be created, and the QB system can generate the detail and budget to actual report whenever needed. So another great insight into how to do some accounting. I love that we have all of these experts here to share their best practices. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's we'll come back to best practices. I love it. Thank you guys for participating. We're definitely coming back to that. But let's take a look at the case study just so you guys get a sense of what's going on here. So the first receipt, and everyone's going to do this differently. This is just one method. You can add lines, you can subtract lines and play around with formulas if that's useful to you. So don't, take this with a grain of salt and don't think it's set in stone. Every project, every community will operate a little bit differently. So the first one is cleaning supplies. And in this project, I'm going to call that supplies. And according to my line item budget approved in my application, that would be where I would put this. The date here says 5/13/2025. So I'm going to add that. And the description, again, you might put vendor, you might put how things were spent. You might have a separate box for this, but I'll just put cleaning supplies from Target. And the expense is $30.10 at the bottom down here. All right, the next one is Walmart. So this is, I'm imagining this to be some electronic supplies for the office space. It took place on 5/30. So we're going to plug 5/30 into here. And I'll say electronics and Walmart. And this was $222.35. Okay. The next one is 500 brochures from Vistaprint. And I'm imagining that is coming from the other category for workshop supplies. This took place on May 3rd. So let's plug in May 3rd. Oops, not 30th. 3rd. So we'll say 500 brochures. Vistaprint. And again, you could have a line that says unit items. How many units did you purchase? So that was 664.93. The next is payroll. Now you may not have access to payroll, and that's fine. You might be able to ask for a total payment and not by person, so that you're not getting any kind of like sensitive information, but you are getting the total so that you can track accurately. And so that's going to be personnel. And this one was on 5/15 for payroll. And I'm just going to say mid-month payroll. You might be bi-weekly, you might be monthly, whatever you guys do. 13.50. And then we have another one on the 30th. So we're going to do personnel, 5/31, payroll, end of month. And it's the same amount. Okay. And the last one. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. The actual technology help, the actual consultant work took place in May, but it's not been paid. It's due June 1st. It depends on whether you're cash basis or accrual basis. So again, a conversation to have with your finance office, depending on what method works best. For purposes of doing this activity together, I'm going to choose contractual and just put 5/31, end of the month. They did the work in May, and that's how I'm tracking it. But again, track what makes the most sense for your organization. So I'll put web developer and the total, which was $89.87. Now, something not shown in this case study is indirect. And you can draw down indirect off of modified total direct costs, and that would be stipulated in your IDC rate agreement. So you'll want to be aware of that. So I'm just going to make note that we don't consider the contract or the contractual web developer part of indirect. So I'll put indirect at 20%. And for the amount, I'm just going to do a sum of everything except contractual. And I'm going to times that by 20%. So we get our amount here. Now, the best thing about this little tracker is it does the math for you. Everything in the expenditures line starts to add up. And you can see in the balance line how much is remaining based on the approved budget. So it's going to help you kind of stay on track of things. And that's a quick overview, quick and dirty. So if you have questions, if you want to play around with it, if you want to tailor it, reach out to us. We can certainly walk you through how to do that. I'm going to ask Paige to take us back to the slide deck. All right, thank you. So essentially, once you've got that comparison, you're going to be able to see very quickly the differences between what was approved and how much has been spent. If you do it over the course of a year, for instance, you're going to be able to tell, okay, where are we falling behind? In this example, and the numbers are random, this is not real data, but you can see here, okay, let's say this particular example has nearly 90,000 requested in federal funding for personnel. This is August, we're in August now. This grant is going to roll over into the next budget period at the end of September. They only have 1 month, 1.5 months left to spend down personnel, and they are only halfway there. They're at about 55,000. So there is another 35,000 on the table not being spent. Is that because there was staff turnover? Is that because somebody got sick and took leave? What's going on there? Fringe is the same situation. Fringe has a gap between where they said they would be and where they ought to be. So that's probably because personnel is behind schedule. Travel is pretty darn close. Maybe that's because they attended the post-award training in the first year, but their grantee meeting got canceled, which happens a lot especially with COVID and issues like that. So they didn't spend that travel funding. Supplies is close, it's on track. Contractual, there was no contractual. Other would be all the things related to completing their project. Whether it's elder volunteer hours and honorarium, maybe it's workshop materials, maybe it's office space, what have you, they are behind on those drawdowns. So the question becomes, okay, what do they need to make up? Or similarly, maybe they came in under budget. Maybe instead of paying for things, they found a partner who is willing to donate it. Now it's part of their non-federal share and they've met their match and they came in under budget. They have quite a bit of funds left to spend elsewhere. So again, these budget comparisons are really helpful for you as program staff to stay on top of your project. All right, just a few more recommendations. So you have your finances and you're tracking it with that tracker we recommended. Now you can have a conversation. Okay, I got muted. So let me backtrack a bit. So you've got your tracker, you have a way to communicate with your program staff. And I did see most of you are meeting monthly, that's great. Weekly is even better. If you're meeting less than quarterly, that is probably concerning. You may want to have a conversation more frequently than just when you get your quarterly P&L statements or even semi-annual check-ins. Payment management's reporting, as well as ANA's reporting, has gone to a semi-annual basis. And that is not enough frequency for you to stay on top of your tracking. So definitely get your tracking spreadsheet together and talk with your accounting to be sure that you are both on the same page and that you are not missing any project-related expenses. The next thing you can do, once you've tracked your expenses against your approved budget, you can track your expenses against your drawdowns. And this is where you might notice, okay, if you as a project director spent $200 on printing flyers, for instance, did your bookkeeper or your accountant also draw down $200? If they are not drawing down frequently enough, you might find there's a discrepancy between what you have spent money on and what they've gotten reimbursed for through the grant. So ask yourself, where is the discrepancy if there is one, and keep tabs on that information so that you know where you stand in your project. And finally, and I've said it before, reach out to us. We're here to help. ANA has project specialists that are working on your projects, TA staff who can act as liaison and spend more time with you working one-on-one. We also have that post-award training manual and other materials to make sure that you aren't missing a beat with your projects. And finally, we've gotten quite a few best practices dropped into the chat box. I'm so thankful that you guys are sharing and talking with each other. I see a few comments here that we may have missed. Let's see. Okay, so we got an answer there. Cynthia asked, is it okay to use credit card statements instead of detailed receipts? And Janet said, you might have more than one category in a receipt, for example, program supplies and office supplies. Very good observation, Janet. Thank you for that feedback. Also, credit card statements are not going to document purchases made. The way that credit card statements are displayed, and for the same reason that Janet has mentioned, they're not going to be enough for an in-depth audit, for instance. So you're going to want to have that documentation of the purchase itself. And then a comment from Anthony, we have similar tracker, but more detailed with vendors, and each seat is a category in itself, like supplies, other, personnel, etc. The second sheet comparison is what we call project recap overview, where it shows total expense per subcategory along with the total balance and expense of the grant on the bottom. Then we match it with PMS and our financial reporting for checks and balances. My goodness. Okay, so maybe Anthony should have given this training. That sounds amazing. That's the kind of tool that everyone should work towards. But I understand that some people, you might have lower capacity, or maybe you've just never done finances before. And to be honest, it's been a while since I've done them myself. So thank you for that overview. And then another comment, I find it challenging when the organization's purchaser makes a purchase for multiple grants in one transaction vendor. Any recommendations? Yeah, definitely having that conversation. Thank you, Janet. Splitting expenses by, you can have account codes and have those split in your accounting, software, whatever you're using, QuickBooks, Sage. Even if it's an Excel spreadsheet, it just depends on what's being used in your kind of organization. And having those needed conversations like Eric walked through, collaborating and making sure that people are listening and providing insight. So yeah, definitely. We can line item in NetSuite. Oh, NetSuite. Okay, I've not heard of that one. So yeah, more tools. This is great. And Janet says, I run into this all the time. Know your programs as a financial person. Yes, definitely. Does anyone have any additional questions? I'm going to move on to this next slide here. And if not, I'll pass it back to Napua. Thank you, Napua.
Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand or unmuting themselves. So I want to thank Jenica for giving such a dynamic and insightful presentation. And hopefully this presentation will help all of you to strengthen your understanding on how, what funders require. And I just did really want to touch real quick on, using your line item budget along with your OWP to submit those justifications in PMS. I know some of you have been getting notifications from Defend the Spend. And so a good way to make sure that you have a initial valid and approvable justification is to really take the language from both your line item budget as well as your OWP in justifying what you're making your drawdowns for. All right. So thank you again, Jenica. That was very informative. All right. I want to welcome everybody back. I hope you had a nice break. We are going to be moving forward with our next presentation. Our next presenter is Candy Carmi. She comes to us from from the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, and she serves as the regional director there. Candy, let me hand it over to you for your presentation.
Thanks so much, Napua. Again, my name is Candy Carmi, and I'm the Regional Director of the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. I'm an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin, and I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Just to let you know, I am not a data analyst and I'm not an evaluator. The information that I'm going to be sharing with you today, I've gathered through my 20 years of providing technical assistance to ANA applicants and grantees. So I'm going to be going over what I've learned as best practices over the years. I'm going to provide you with some tips, some things to avoid, and a couple of good resources. So let's get started. So today we're going to go over what is data and why it's important. We'll touch upon confidentiality. We'll talk about collecting and analyzing data. We'll go over visualizing and communicating your findings through reports. We'll talk about ANA outcome visits, and we'll close with talking about how 2 grantees used data on their projects. So, what is data? I think that many people think that the word data simply refers to numbers. But actually, any information you collect about your project can be considered data. It can be numbers, it could be words, it could be dates, photos, recordings. All of these are various types of data. If I was a data analyst, and I already mentioned that I'm not, this slide would show more data types. I think data crunchers categorize data into about a dozen or more different categories. But for our purposes, data can be broadly classified into these 2 categories. Quantitative data is data that can be counted or measured. It could be the number of tribal members attending a community meeting. It could be ages of students in a language class. It could be your weight in pounds. All of these are examples of quantitative data. Qualitative data, on the other hand, is non-numeric information that describes qualities, characteristics, or concepts. It can be collected in interviews or observations. It might be done through journaling, or it could be open-ended questions. So let's say, for example, you have a question on an evaluation that you hand out at the end of a training that asks participants to indicate what they would like to see in future trainings. So they can choose to complete that box and with information or not. But whatever their responses are, that would be qualitative data. ANA does not make you define your data types, but it's helpful to know these terms as some funders may ask you to supply either quantitative or qualitative data or both. So why should you gather data? When you go to the doctor, they check your pulse and they take your blood pressure to assess your health. Gathering and evaluating data on your project is assessing your project's health. Plus, for all of you, it's part of your ANA project. When you wrote your application, you were asked to include a data management plan. So hopefully and ideally, you've been collecting data since you were first funded. For project managers, gathering data helps you evaluate if you're achieving your project goal, your objectives, and your outcomes, and it can help you track your progress, identify potential issues, hopefully early, and help you keep your project on track and within budget. Data that you collect can also be shared with your funders, your tribe, your organization, or your community to demonstrate what your project is doing and its benefits. And thank you, Jenica, who just went over tracking your budgets and project costs. Project costs are another form of data. Tracking your project costs to make sure that they align with your project budget and your scheduled project activities is just another form of data collection, and it can be used to assess the health of your project. In today's climate, funders want data. It's a given. It can be on your community, it could be on prior projects. They just want assurance that they're giving their money to recipients that have documented success with community projects. So data is a great way to demonstrate that success. And lastly, data that you collect can be used to help you design future projects. As you all know, ANA funds projects, not programs. So as a reminder, projects have a defined beginning and a defined end date. Programs can run as long as your organization wants to continue them or has the money to continue them. So let's say at the end of your project, through data you've collected and community feedback, you determine that your community really wants to continue this project. Well, the data that you collect during the project implementation perhaps could be used to sell it to your leadership and help you up, or if they don't buy it, you could use the data to help you apply for another source of funding. So I think sometimes there's reluctance and probably maybe procrastination about collecting data, especially if if your project isn't doing too well. Discovering problems shouldn't be viewed as a project failure, but as an opportunity to learn and improve your project. Hopefully, you made this came to this conclusion about your project not performing well early in your project so you can triage the problem and get your project back on track. And just a reminder, if you are encountering issues or with your project, please make sure to reach out to your ANA program specialist and give them a heads up. There might be ways that they can help, or they could possibly refer you to your TA center to get them to help you. Ideally, when you had your initial orientation with your project staff, you went over what data was going to be collected, how often, the tools that you were going to be using, who was doing collection, who was going to be analyzing the data, how it would be analyzed, how frequently you were going to be preparing reports. Your data management plan should help you guide you with interpreting results. But if you're still stumped, there's a resource that I'm going to be sharing with you at the end of this presentation that can perhaps help you. And lastly, I think that some of us think of evaluation as another form of Big Brother watching what we're doing. Monitoring and evaluation are kind of two different things in this context. Monitoring a project, it asks if you're meeting the operating standards set by a funder or an agency. And evaluation asks, has the project been successful in meeting its objectives, goals, and outcomes? So it's kind of two different things. This might not apply to all of you, but confidentiality is important. If you have participants, they should be aware of what your project is doing and why you're collecting data. And if you're collecting personal or sensitive information about individuals, you should create a consent form that states that the information you are gathering will not be shared nor associated with them by name. And they also should have the option to either agree with participating in the project and participating in evaluation, or if they should have the ability to opt out at any time. A consent form assures them that their privacy is going to be maintained. Keep completed evaluations or forms with any type of personal information in a secure location. You don't want to keep them in a file folder on your desk or in your desk drawer. And access to the information should also be limited or restricted. If you're working with a large number of participants, you might want to consider creating number codes for them rather than using names. Ultimately, your organization should have policies and procedures for securing sensitive documents, and you should be aware of those policies, and your staff should also be aware of them. And finally, you should have a policy on destroying the sensitive documents after your project ends. As you're collecting data, you're using that data management plan that you created and that was in your application, and you're using various tools to collect data. If you need to create or develop new tools during the course of your project, make sure that they measure a change, that they're geared for your audience in terms of their age, and hopefully the respondent should be able to complete whatever you created, a survey or a questionnaire or evaluation, in a reasonable amount of time. And one thing I always recommend is that pilot test your tools if possible. Use a small sample of individuals in your community and give them the survey or whatever tool and ask them to complete it. By pilot testing, it should hopefully help you identify any potential rewording or clarification of questions that you need to do with your tools. And you might determine that you need to either delete or add more questions. If your survey is long, like something like a community assessment, piloting your tool first can help provide you with an estimated time it takes to complete the survey or tool. And you can actually just go ahead and add that onto, like as a footer. Completing this survey is going to take approximately 30 minutes of your time. It's just a nice way to let people know how long it's going to take to complete an evaluation or survey. One of my best tips is to make data collection, and we'll talk about analysis, part of your project routine. I visited a project manager who was super overwhelmed and stressed when she was first handed an A&A project to manage. And it was because the project had a lot of different moving parts. It was helping high school students increase their grades to hopefully pursue post-secondary education, and it involved several high schools in a very large geographic area. She had to collect data on school, after school tutoring attendance, on students' grades, the number of times they visited the guidance counselor. She created folders on each student so she could keep notes on their progress. And Also, they were receiving college prep training. So there was all kinds of things going on with this project. One of the issues, though, was that there wasn't an after school activity bus every day of the week. So parents oftentimes had to pick up their kids from these after school sessions. But the project had already budgeted to provide gas cards to parents after so many times of having to pick up their kids. And I can't remember now, but I think it was like after 5 or 6 pickups, the parents were entitled to like something like a $25 gas card. So there was a lot that this poor lady needed to track. What she ended up doing, I think to save her sanity, was she found a continuing education class on intermediate Excel, and she ended up creating some of the best spreadsheets that I've seen. So not only was she able to track grades and attendance, but she also included logic functionality that basically when she entered that a student had attended an after school class and was picked up by their parents, she'd get a pop-up saying that so and so's parent needed to be issued a gas card. Awesome spreadsheets. But I think one of the most important things that she did was she looked at her calendar and she selected one day of the week and she blocked out a time that she was going to do her data entry every week. So no matter what, throughout the project, I think it was Thursdays at 1, she would start aggregating and entering all of her data into the spreadsheets that she created. Doing this all on a regular basis, while it took a lot of work, it definitely alleviated her initial stress. And I think it ended up being, she ended up being able to really document the success of her tribe's project. I mean, it was really great seeing the work that she did with that project. It's also important when you're collecting data that you do it in a consistent and systematic manner. Uh, you should have already determined who's going to be collecting data and any tools that they're using. And remember that your staff should all be trained on evaluating your project so that you're all on the same page. So that also includes you need to, if you pick up anyone new during the course of your project, you want to take the time to meet with them and train them on evaluation. I visited some projects where they actually created like a data evaluation uh, handbook or guidebook that they gave out to all of their project staff. And that had examples of the tools and provided a lot of information on data collection. But you could also use there's also another tool that I'll go over in a minute that you can use. Um, Once you've collected data, you need to analyze the data. And one of the ways to do that is by, before you even start, you need to make sure to clean your data. So, what do I mean by that? Scan through your tools and everything that you've collected and make sure that it's all correct. So let's say you have a participant evaluation and you have a box that everybody's supposed to complete with how many children they have. And you're going through your evaluations after your event, and you have one that has a $sign in the box. Well, obviously, that's a mistake. Maybe not, because kids do cost a lot of money, but for your evaluation purposes, it's not what you were looking for. Let me give you another example. This is a real world example from our trainings that we do. We hand out evaluations after every training that we do. And the top part of the evaluation asks a series about 6 or 7 questions, and the participant can select a rating. So they select a rating from strongly disagree, neutral, agree, or they strongly agree. So there's 5 options they have to select from. And we follow these questions with several open-ended questions. Well, every so often, as we're going through our evaluations, uh, we get one that all the questions are answered strongly disagree. But when we look at the open-ended questions, all of the responses are about how great the training was. So in a case like that, I'm going to probably change the response that I record into either agree or strongly agree, because obviously the participant, when they were completing it, did it quickly and maybe didn't read the instructions or just assumed and they filled in the wrong boxes. Now, conversely, if I look at those open-ended questions and they are not very good responses, I'm just going to leave it as strongly disagree. But this is what I'm talking about with regard to cleaning your data. Make sure that your responses and what you're reporting on are all correct, and decide as a team what you're going to do if you have incorrect data or somebody accidentally filled out a box wrong. So there's a lot of tools for analyzing data, and I think the most popular and widely used one is Excel. And Excel is great because you're entering your data into it, but you can also use it to build some simple forms. There's templates you can build with it. And then you can turn around and use the data that you've entered into the Excel to create charts and visuals. So excellent tool. And the other thing that I love about Excel is you can find all kinds of tutorials, for example, on YouTube, on the internet, on various aspects of using Excel. So there's a lot out there on using it, and I think it's pretty relatively easy to use. Tableau is a lot more robust. It's a visualization tool, and it allows users to work with and combine data from different sources. So you can create heat maps with it, timelines, and it's good to help you see trends or relationships in your data. Tableau is not free though. The basic version runs about $180 annually. But if your organization is doing a lot of projects where you're tracking a lot of data, it might be a good investment. Check it out. Google Analytics is for analyzing your website performance, and it tracks all kinds of things. How many people come to your website, what content they click, and they present the information in very user-friendly dashboards and reports. And Google Analytics is easy to use, even for those that don't have an analysis or analytic background. Super easy to use. Looker Studio is a free tool from Google, and it allows users to present data in visually easy to understand formats. Databases are handy for collecting and analyzing large amounts of data. To create a database, you need someone who's familiar with building databases, but who also knows a little bit about your needs. If you don't have someone internal to your organization, you're probably going to have to outsource somebody who can create the database. But this type of investment could make sense if your organization is tracking a lot of data, or data on perhaps on tribal members or a lot of different parts of the community, large numbers of participants. So the last bullet talks about says the importance of context and analysis. So all that means is that context means that it's the circumstances that surround data collection that could impact your findings. So here's another example. My tribe is located right outside Green Bay, Wisconsin. If I was to schedule an event on Green Bay Packer game day, my attendance is going to be non-existent. So I would make a note on that event that I accidentally scheduled on a not good day. I would make a note on my evaluations or anything that I was collecting that was a game day. So make sure that if you have something like that happen, that you note it to remind yourself when you get around to analyzing the data. It could be something like a weather event. It could be something like another event being held at the same time or a virus going around. So let's say you're holding 5 different trainings. And 4 of the 5 trainings, you had between 19 and 22 participants. And then one of them, the trainings, there was only 8 people that attended. You want to make a note. If there's a reason that you know of that there was only 8, again, let's say it was a flu season and everyone in your community was battling the flu, you would note that on your evaluation tools or in your notes somewhere, just so that, again, when you were analyzing everything, you could recall what the reason was. Sometimes there is no reason. Sometimes that day you were just going to have only 8 participants, but you need to look at your data in context of what's going on in your community and what could possibly be skewing your results. So the next thing you're going to do, you've collected data, you're analyzing it. The next thing you need to do is start figuring out how you're going to display and present your data. So data visualization tools use charts, graphs, maps, infographics, all to turn your data into easy to understand visuals. And it can help both you and your audience easily see trends. Whether you're presenting information to your board of directors or to the community, it's an easy way to convey results, and it can be much more impactful than reading a written report. So again, like I mentioned earlier, if you're using Excel, you have access to a large assortment of graphs and charts to select from. But just make sure to pick the one that clearly shows your data. A couple of years ago, I was reading applications during paneling, and there was an application that had 8 pages of pie charts, bar charts, line charts. It was all different kinds of charts. And when I first looked at it, I go, "Oh wow, these folks have really done a great job of presenting great data." But then when I started reading it and looking at all the charts, they were all showing the same 37 respondents to a survey. So you don't need to present multiple visuals showing the same results or data. Pick one that you feel best exemplifies what you're trying to convey to your audience. So Excel is great. Tableau, again, robust. You can try it, but you do need to pay for it if you're going to use it. Batch Geo and Mapline are both free, and you use them to show geographic data. So let's say you want to show where all the Bigfoot sightings were in your state. You could enter in the locations and it's going to produce a map showing every location where there was a Bigfoot. Live Chart and Graph Maker are both online chart makers. And I really like this slide because this is something that ANA created, and it's really an excellent example for visualizing data. If you take a look at this, and I don't hope you can see it and that it's pretty clear. I tried to make it as clear as possible, but there's a lot of data on this one-page sheet, and it's easy to understand, and it's definitely better than having to read several pages of a written report. But this is an example of using graphs, charts, infographics to really make an impactful statement about what you're trying to present. So now that you've got all of this information, you need to figure out who you're reporting to. Who are you going to be providing this information to? Know your audience. Is it your community? Is it your leadership? Is it your funder? You definitely need to know your audience. For example, your report to project funders is probably going to be the most comprehensive report. Funders use your reports to support allocation of additional dollars for projects. And usually, this kind of report provides very detailed information on the project, its history, the valuation methodology that you used, and your data analyses. It's a very in depth report. A report to your organization might include information to support management decisions about ongoing or future projects. It might not include all that evaluation methods information, but it usually will provide more information on your findings. And a report to your community is usually something that's brief, a brief synopsis of your project. A lot of times you present it in a PowerPoint and it includes maybe some photos, some graphs, and charts. No matter what or who you're reporting to, including real life accounts can humanize the data and statistics that you're showing. So try to include participant testimonials or responses in your report. Let me go back one, went too far. So this brings me to ANA outcome visits. ANA conducts outcome visits with grantees close to the end of their projects. Now, not everyone will get an outcome visit. ANA does let you know, they make a selection and they'll let you know quite a few weeks before they're going to either come to visit or they do a virtual visit. The purpose of the visit is to gather data on how projects progressed and to assess project outcomes. And it's also an opportunity for ANA to gather best practices, talk about any challenges that you had while you were implementing your project and how you overcame them, and if your objectives were met. If they come to do a site visit, the site visits usually are about a day long. But again, ANA now is going from that one time they were doing only on-site visits, and now it's a meld of both virtual and on-site. Again, if you're being considered for an outcome visit, ANA will give much advance notice. Prior to either coming out to seeing you or meeting with you virtually, ANA staff review your project history and all of your OPRs, and they complete a form that's going to guide their discussion during their visit with you. They typically like to spend time with the project manager, project staff, and project participants if they're available or if you had them. And they might take a tour of your community. The information that they gather on each project gets turned into a 2-page report that is included in a report to Congress. So this is, on this slide is a report that was prepared on ANA visits in fiscal year 2019. And the report is, I think this one is about 160 pages long. It's a mix of narrative reporting, an executive summary. There's a lot of graphics in here and infographics. And these are examples on your screen of 2 that I pulled from the report. And they also consist of 2-page synopsises of the grantees that they visited. I really like these reports, and I, would recommend that you check this out because it gives you information about the type of projects that ANA funds, and it might even spark an idea for a project in your community. So I really like these, and in the trainings that I do, I always recommend that people take a look at these. But the reason I'm also talking about this is I've done a couple of these visits over the years, and I would now like to share the story of 2 grantees that I visited. The first grantee, they were doing a community assessment. They hadn't done one in like several years, and they wanted to find out about gaps in services. Did they have any? Is there anything that they needed to be doing? They just wanted to, again, take the pulse of the community. So, one of the first things that they did is that they created a team of 10 community members, and they used them to help draft their assessment survey. They also hired, after they disseminated the survey, they hired 2 I forget what they called them, but it's equivalent to census takers. They hired 2 census takers who would go around and assist people with completing the assessment. Prior to sending out the assessment, they piloted their tool and then to determine if they needed to make any changes. They came up, I think it was a 16-page assessment is what they finally landed on. And they sent that out to every member of every household in the community. Prior to sending it out, they created a little brochure, basically letting everybody know that, hey, we're sending out this assessment and we're going to use the results to design new programs and secure funding for additional programs or projects. So they informed the community first, they pilot tested their survey instrument, and then they sent it out. And their outreach after they sent it out was pretty, again, extensive. They went to community events, they did phone trees, they used social media, they were at tribal meetings, they reminded people to take the survey on their tribal newspaper and website. And I think a 68% response is pretty good for a survey. Once they got all the data from the assessments and they compiled it, they created a color brochure on all of the results, and it was entitled Community Assessment Report, Findings of the Tribal Citizen Survey, and they sent that out to the entire community. It was a 31-page report, and it was rife with photographs. There was narrative, there was a bunch of charts and graphs, and these are two that I pulled from their from the brochure and the report that they created. Here's an example of another graphic that they had in their report using infographics. And they also had this in their, another example of using infographics to convey results. I mean, their report was chock full of, like I said, graphs and photographs. It was really, really very easy to read. After they sent it out, and as part of their findings from their assessment was that they got a lot of results that said that, and a significant finding was that a lot of community members had no idea on the tribal services that were available to them. So what they did is they created a guide to resources and programs where they listed all the tribal programs, phone numbers, contact information, hours of operation, what they did, what you needed to do to take part of them. There was all kinds of information, and they also determined that they were going to update it annually and resend it out every year. Right after they sent it out, I think they waited a couple of weeks. They then held a tribal resource fair where they had members of all their tribal departments attend and explain to the community the services that they provided. So, what was the impact of their project data? Before this project ended, they received a $450,000 award from another agency. And while I was there, they were using data that they gathered to apply for additional awards. And every tribal department used data from this assessment to inform their work. This was a project that used data for maximum community impact. Grantee number 2 had a different type of project, a lot of moving parts, but a different project. And they were focused on strengthening young families with children, and specifically young parents who maybe the parents were no longer together. They had all kinds of activities, and they had a lot of opportunities to help the parents. So they provided assistance to those who didn't have their high school diploma with getting their GEDs. They did training on resume completion and interviewing skills. They took them to job fairs. There was one-on-one counseling on employability. They had family fun nights and movie nights, and they went to baseball games, and they even offered financial literacy courses. They did parenting and relationship building school skills. There was just all kinds of things that this project was doing. So when I went and visited this project, and I went with another ANA outcome evaluator, after our introductions with the project staff, we started asking questions about how the project went. And the project director had been there for about 2 months, so they weren't really knowledgeable on everything that went on in the project. And they brought to the meeting a banker's box that had all kinds of file folders in it. And for almost every question that we asked on how the activities went. How many people did you have attend? How many people ended up getting jobs? How many, how many family fun nights? How many did you hold? How many people attended? Almost all of those questions, they responded with that they did not know, and that the information was in the file folders in that box. And I was a little surprised about this because when I read their initial application, they included a data specialist as part of their staffing plan, and they named them. And when I had walked into the meeting, I was walking past offices, and everyone's name was on a plaque next to their office. And I saw the name of the data specialist. So I'm thinking, great, they're going to have all kinds of data on this project. I frankly don't know what that data specialist did, because nothing had been analyzed or looked at or compiled in any manner. They did have 4 participants who showed up and indicated that they liked the project. So while, the other thing that was interesting about this project is that the project manager indicated that the tribe was interested in continuing the project as a potential program. And I think they would have had a much better chance of selling this as a program had they been compiling the data as they were going along. And also, they could have provided feedback to their leadership. Uh, Maybe the financial literacy component wasn't well attended, or they didn't have a lot of participants. Maybe there were certain aspects of the project that were better than other aspects of the project. Unfortunately, when we were there, we were not able to get any information about that, and other than the anecdotal responses from the 4 participants. So this would be an example of, again, don't let your data sit. Make sure that you're, analyzing it and collecting it as your project progresses. So in conclusion, you need to make sure that you are collecting and analyzing your data as part of your work routine. Letting it sit like they did till the end it could be a mess and very time consuming to start, putting all of that data into spreadsheets or whatever tools you're using to aggregate data. When you're creating your report, make sure that your message is tailored to your audience, whether it's your community at a community meeting, your tribal leadership, members of your organization. Tailor your message to your audience and make sure to use visuals and like graphs and charts and infographics. There are 2 resources that I highly recommend that you download. One of them is the Program Manager's Guide to Evaluation, and the other one is a roadmap for collaborative and effective evaluation in tribal communities. The Program Manager's Guide, extremely user friendly. It is not written in evaluator jargon. It is very easy to use. And the roadmap for evaluation in tribal communities is about half the length of the Program Manager's Guide. And I put them both up here because sometimes you can refer to the Program Manager's Guide for more information that is in the roadmap. So I like using them in tandem. So, and with that, I'll close out this presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in your chat.
Well, actually, we're out of time, and it's time for a break. But Candy, thank you so much. Collecting data can be a lot for a lot of us. And so I really appreciate how you broke it down And I know that some of you are ending your projects at the, this year. And so, take the opportunity to gather the data you need to develop new project ideas for funding. We are out of time, and so we want to close this training with a couple more slides. If we can go to the next slide. We do have some upcoming trainings. They are our project planning and development trainings. So a lot of what we heard today could play into planning your next project. For the Pacific, we will be running trainings in September in both the CNMI and Guam. And in October, we'll be having live trainings come to American Samoa and on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. The Western region will be holding 2 virtual trainings in September and live trainings in Portland, Oregon in October and New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. The Eastern region will be offering PPD trainings in Oklahoma City starting in September, and we'll also be holding 2 virtual trainings in September and October, and a training coming to you in Buffalo, New York in October. And the Alaska region is also holding a training in September in Anchorage, Alaska. And I believe they also have a few virtual trainings that will be announced at a later date. If we can go to the next slide. So to just have a better picture of which regions you would be attending trainings in, here is a map. In the green on the left side of the United States map are these states that the Western region serves. And then to the right of that are all the states that are served by the Eastern region. And then of course, the state of Alaska would look up the Alaska trainings, and then the Hawaii, Guam, CNMI, and American Samoa Pacific region folks, you can contact our office at these websites that you see on the page here. And just to let you know, we will be sending out a copy of these PowerPoints. Many of these PowerPoints have links in them that you can actually click on and access resources through. We'd like to close this training and thank you all for participating, but most of all, thank you for all that you do for our Native communities. And we wish you a great rest of your day or evening. Thank you.